Hi everybody, today is a pretty special day because on October 27th, 2010, I uploaded my very first video to YouTube, which was the video thanking Phoenix for her contribution to the corset community. And a lot has happened in those 4 years, so today I'm going to be bringing back a type of video that I haven't done in a really long time, and that is the case study. And I made this particular corset following Scarlett Sapsford's corset making course, which I will be reviewing later on this week, by the way. So this style of construction is different from how I usually make corsets, so I'm going to go over some of those differences today. And the pattern is from her corset making compendium, and it was cool actually going through the course as if I were one of her students and just, you know, making a corset from scratch in a completely different way that I would normally approach it. So I'm going to show you the features of this corset today, what I learned from this different style of construction, and what I would do differently next time, and I will be reviewing the compendium and the course later on this week. So here is the front, the side, the back, and the other side. Okay, so here is the corset laid flat, and for the materials, it's actually 2 main layers. The fashion fabric, which is actually a floating fashion fabric, and this is the first time that I have ever done a full floating fashion fabric. It's only really attached at the front, center front, and center back seams here. I've done a semi-floating fashion fabric before in my Princess Tamina corset, actually 4 years ago, but that was the last time that I attempted such a thing, and I kind of swore it off. But I wanted to see how it would turn out in this one, and this one turned out much more smooth than my Tamina corset, probably because the fabric is a little bit more suitable. Now, one of the things that you might notice about the center front here is that I attempted some pattern matching, and I had sort of played around with like mirror matching center front panels before, but this is my first honest attempt at doing asymmetric pattern matching across the entire front of a corset. So you can see here is like a scrap piece from the fabric that I cut it from. So this is sort of a mid-weight sort of upholstery fabric. It looks like it's sort of twill underneath. One thing that I can say is that no matter how heavyweight it seems, it's always a good idea just to interface it just in case, because I realized a little bit too late that this can actually warp a little bit. And in the center front panels here, this panel kind of swerved off in a drunken manner. And so the center front seam, which should technically be the easiest seam to match because it's completely straight in the center front, yeah, that doesn't actually match that well at the top. Fortunately, I did not anticipate my busk to be a little bit too short for this corset, so I ended up putting some grommets at the top, and when I wear the corset, the tension actually pulls this center front seam open a little bit at the top, which makes it look like it matches better than it actually did in the first place. So, yay for happy mistakes. I initially thought it would be really easy to pattern match something like this because it's really large print, it's really high contrast, but that actually ended up working against me because the motif is so clear cut. It means that any little mistake I made would have been just that much more noticeable if any seam was just 2 millimeters off. Another thing that I would do differently if I were to do pattern matching again is instead of doing a top stitch between each panel here, I might actually end up pressing the seams open, because depending on whether you're looking at the corset at this angle or at this angle, because that little top stitch is a little bit thicker, that part of the fabric is just a tiny bit raised, then depending on the angle, it might look like it either matches or it doesn't match. Whereas if I had just pressed the seam completely open, then it would matter less what angle you're looking at it, and it would look like it matches at almost any angle. So this Overbust pattern is a 7-panel pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it is the exact same pattern that Scarlett had used for her own video tutorial when she was making the corset making course. So it was very easy to follow along since we were basically using the same pieces. Now I modified the pattern to fit my body a little bit better. So for instance, here's a panel 7. So I took the PDF and I basically blew up the pattern so that a centimeter on the pattern matched a centimeter on the actual page, printed it out. It took, I believe, 9 pages to print out the whole pattern, and then I tape them together. And this part of the pattern is supposed to actually match like this line down here, but I actually ended up extending it an inch between the waist and the underbust area because I know that I'm long-waisted and low-waisted. And actually, if I were to do this again, I would raise the front another inch or so because I like to have more coverage on my bust area. I prefer to have more coverage. Another thing that I did is I added approximately 3 centimeters to the pattern. So this was the original center back, and that is like one of the centimeters that I had added to the pattern right there. So I figured I'd be able to get away with it, and I was bad and I did not make a mock-up. So the bust ended up being a little bit small in reality. So if I were to make another corset from this same pattern, I would probably add 2 inches more in the bust area just to give myself a little bit more room in the front and also prevent the muffin top that I was experiencing in the back there. So like I said before, the fashion fabric is actually a full floating fashion fabric, so you can see that I can actually separate it from the entire lining or strength layer here. And the reason that I chose to do a floating fashion fabric was I wanted the matched motif here on the front to be as unbroken as possible. So I didn't want boning channels to be visible on the outside of the corset. So all of my boning channels are visible on the inside. And now in the corset making course, she shows you how to either put the bones on the outside or on the inside layer here. So I chose the inside, and it's single boned on the seams here because this is just a sample and it's not for extreme tight lacing or anything. But for as few bones that are actually in here, I think that it holds its shape fairly well. So you can see the shadow of the waist tape here. It's 1 inch wide twill tape that is invisibly stitched between the layers. It's anchored onto the strength fabric, and you can see that extends right from the center front panel here at the busk all the way back to the back grommets here. And here's a close-up of the binding, and oh, you can really see the sparkliness of the fabric here. So this is actually not glitter, it's metallic thread that is actually woven through the fabric, so the glitter will never fall off, which is kind of awesome. So you can see that this is obviously cut from the same fabric here, and it was machine stitched on the outside, and also on the inside here, a little bit of top stitch on the inside, and it was stitched in the ditch on the outside here. Now this is admittedly not the best fabric for binding because it was very thick, it doesn't like to be pressed, and it also had a tendency to fray. So I cut the bias quite wide, and that is why my binding ended up being pretty wide as well. So I have a tiny little Modesty placket on the knob side of the busk here. It's just about a 1/4 inch wide extending from the knob side, and that is all that I really need to make sure that, you know, when there's tension on the corset and the two parts of the busk separate a little bit, that the motif will sort of, you know, remain unbroken through there. I wanted to make a Modesty placket for the back out of the same fabric and maybe have the motif again on the back, but my fabric is actually kind of limited. I have enough fabric to make one underbust version of this corset, and I would rather make an entire full corset and go without a Modesty panel than make a Modesty panel and have to throw out the rest of the fabric. So that is why I went without a Modesty panel for this. The busk that I used in this corset is 12 inches long and has 6 loops and pins, all equidistantly spaced. It is a standard flexible busk, and I was going to use a much longer heavy-duty busk in here. Oops, my battery died. But as I was saying, I was going to use this heavy-duty busk, but this is what happens when you don't give things enough forethought. I have had this kicking around for a couple of years, and I forgot how long it was before I took it out of storage. So yeah, I cut down the center front panels a little bit too much for that. So I just ended up using an underbusk length busk and putting some grommets at the top, which, as I said before, ended up working out to match the center front motif a little bit better than it would have normally if I'd used the correct length busk anyways. So this corset has a total of 16 bones, 8 on each side, not including the center front busk. As I mentioned before, it is single boned on the seams here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are 1/4 inch wide spirals, and in the back here, sandwiching the grommets, are 2 1/2 inch wide flat steel bones. There are a total of 34 two-part size 00 grommets in this corset with a small to medium flange around them. This was from my C-Step 2 machine, and actually these were not the grommets that I wanted to originally put in this corset. I wanted to put in my size 0 grommets with the very large flange around it because one, my C-Step 2 machine actually pierces the fabric and sets the grommets at the same time. So if I wanted to put fray stop on it, I would have to kind of like put a blob there and then wait for it to dry and then set the grommet afterwards completely. And because this fabric is prone to fraying, yeah, I wanted to make sure that it had a larger flange around it, but I ordered some grommets in the mail, and it's been several weeks and I don't know where they are, so I just decided to finish up the project and use these ones. And if I need to, you know, rip out all of these grommets later and replace them, I'll do so. And you can still see that I kind of have some chalk marks there, so I'll try to rub those out. The laces are double-faced satin ribbon, 1/2 inch wide, and finished in silver, and I like how it kind of matches the rest of the corset, sort of. So I hope you enjoyed this case study, and I think I've been bitten by the sewing bug again. I'm excited about making corsets again, so this doesn't mean that I'm open for commissions right now, but I'll probably be making more than one corset every 2 years. And thank you so much for joining me over these last 4 years. When I made my very first video, I thought maybe Phoenix would see it amongst a handful of other people. I had absolutely no idea that there was such a large audience for corsetry, and it's amazing to see how the corset community has grown over the last few years. So once again, thank you guys so much, and I look forward to making more videos for you guys in the future. So I will see you all in a few days for the next video. Bye.